And so now I would like to invite the Reverend Jay Barry to come give us our readings and our children's message and our sermon for today. Thank you, Jay.
Good morning. Our first reading is from the book of Genesis, chapter 9, verses 9 through 13. And as for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living thing that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, of all that go out from the ark, every beast of the earth. Thus, I establish a covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of this flood. Never again shall a flood destroy the earth. And God said, "This is a sign of the covenant which I make between me and you, and every living creature that is with you, for perpetual generations. I set a rainbow in the cloud, and it will be a sign for the covenant between me and the earth." Our second reading is from the book of Matthew, chapter 25. It's about a parable that will be kind of unfolding in the talk. Then the kingdom of heaven shall be likened to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Now 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish. Those who were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their vessels and in their lamps. But while the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. And at midnight a cry was heard, "Behold, the bridegroom is coming. Come out to meet him." Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Please give us some of your oil, for our lamps have run out." But the wise answered, saying, "No, lest there not be enough for us and you. Go rather to those who sell and buy oil for yourselves." And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were already went in with him to the wedding, and then the door was shut. Afterwards the other virgins came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open the door for us." But he answered and said, "Assuredly I say unto you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day or the hour in which the Son of Man is coming." And the last very short reading, but a very kind of potent reading, is from the Theology of Emanuel Swedenborg from Arcana Celestia, Secrets of Heaven. Conscience cannot possibly exist except in those who love the neighbor as themselves and think affirmatively about religious truth. So is it the children's talk now? Okay. So, I'm honored to be kind of leading your service today. And right now I'm talking to the kids. And there's a gathering of children in here. They're just kind of a little bit older children, like myself. But if there's any kids out there watching, I have a little table here. And I think even from a distance, you might be able to see what these are. You might be able to see that they're kind of shiny and they're round. They're conical, and they have this long spirally thing on the top. This is kind of high, and this is a little bit lower, but they both have spirals. And they both have an opening like a doorway. And guess what these are? I think you probably know. They're shells. Now, I'm not an expert about shells, but I think they're conch shells of some kind. And these are actually the home of little creatures that the Lord made who live near the seaside. And if you could see them as closely as I'm looking at them, they are really marvelous. They have this beautiful color and shine, and This one has beautiful, kind of like almost tortoiseshell browns and golds and silvers. I mean, these are stunning. Who made these? How did he make them? Well, we know that the Lord made them. And these are the homes for these beautiful creatures, but they also mean something. It's a perfect representation of the good and the truth and the beautiful order in the Lord's created universe. You know, you can go outside today and look at any plant that you see along the sidewalks or in your backyard, and you can see things just as wondrous as these. The beautiful order of life, the beautiful order of creation. And we're going to be talking about that in the adult talk. But our purpose as human beings and as children is to learn about that order. We learn about the order, and then we try to practice it. Like children, sometimes we fall down, and then we get up again, and then we try a little bit harder. But that's what the Lord has intended for us. What he wants for us is a home just as beautiful as these homes for these little tiny creatures. A beautiful home filled with love, a heart filled with compassion and empathy for other people, a mind full of sensitivity so that we can listen to one another and support one another. That's the kind of home the Lord wants for us. And if we could see that home, it would be even more beautiful than these beautiful shells. Amen. So I think we're going to start our adult talk now. And just as a little disclaimer, for parents, if you have I would encourage that your children not listen to this sermon. Why? Because I'm going to talk about some things that are a little upsetting. They're upsetting to Christians. They're upsetting, it's going to be further down the road in the talk, about how Christianity, historically, has really done some harmful things. Now, we want in our day to be a compassionate church and to really help people. But historically, we've had trouble with that. And the Lord gives us a promise in the promise of his second coming that Swedenborg writes about, of a new age, a new time, and a new church. And what we're going to frame out in this parable, it's a new age of conscience where we try to right the wrongs that have occurred at previous times. So the parable we're going to talk about is the parable of the 10 foolish virgins and the 10 wise virgins. So before we get into that, let's just look at the symbols. And Swedenborg's theology is a theology of symbolism, where the entire Bible, every person, place, and thing has an amazing spiritual significance. And this parable is no different. So let's just look at some of the principal symbols in this parable. The first one I can think of is a lamp. The virgins had lamps. Some had oil, some did not. So what is a lamp? Well, in those days, in the first century, they didn't have electric light, so they would put oil in the lamp, and that would illuminate the hall where they were, or the room that they were. In this case, a chamber where there was going to be a wedding. And the lamp is a symbol of faith. If I think about myself and some of the dark times that I've been through, I needed my faith. It was a light. It was a light to help illuminate the path so that I could find my way through darkness. So a lamp is a symbol of faith. It's not my theology. That's what Swedenborg highlights for us. The next thing is oil. What is the oil that goes in the lamp? The oil is a symbol of love. It's a symbol of charity. Think of, thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over in Psalm 23. It's a symbol that the Lord loves us. He wants what's best for us. That's why the kings of Israel were anointed with oil, and why a woman actually anointed the Lord's feet the day before he was crucified is a symbol of love. So oil is love. So we have the lamps, we have the oil. The virgins, who were the virgins? They were you and I. It's the church. The virgins are a symbol of the church. Seekers of truth. They've been called to the marriage, and they show up. They are there. They really want to connect. Just like us in the church. So it's the church inside of us and also the church outside of us. So we are the virgins in the story. But there's a very potent symbol in the center of this parable that cannot be denied, and that is all the action unfolds at midnight. Now, I don't know how many stories like that are in the Older New Testament. Some things do happen at night, but in this case it specifies midnight. Now, Swedenborg talks about all times of the day, morning, afternoon, evening, midnight, early morning, as states of mind. States of mind. So we can't deny the fact that where this is happening at midnight is in a very dark state where there's hopelessness. This is the way Swedenborg describes midnight. Hopelessness, despair. In modern day, we'd call it existential crisis, where I don't know who I am, I don't know what to do. That's the time of day, psychologically, when all this unfolds. The bridegroom. So who is the bridegroom? I think this has been interpreted for centuries to think of the Lord who is to come, the Lord in his second coming. But Swedenborg also talks about it in a more universal way as well. And it's the Lord coming to us, to ourselves, in conscience. In conscience. None of us, and Swedenborg maps this out very well, none of us can reach a conscience unless we've been through these dark states. He describes childhood as being a state of early morning and the innocence of childhood, and then later morning, and then afternoon, when actually we have intelligence and we think we know everything. But then that changes into an afternoon state where we start to have trouble and conflict, and that goes into night, where then it's like, Lord, I don't know what's going on. Can you please show me the way? And so reformation and regeneration all take place in those evening states. And then the conscience that is to come, the Lord who is to come inside of us, is the highest level of regeneration. That comes after the midnight state into the early morning. Think of the morning star. I am the morning star. The Lord actually called himself the morning star. So what other representations am I forgetting? Oh, sorry, the most important one. Marriage. He's not talking about marriage the way we think of it. He's talking about the marriage of good and truth in the Lord. He really lays out a beautiful, beautiful presentation, Swedenborg that is, of who God is and how do we define God. And he defines God as the marriage of good and truth united in the divine being, the only divine being, and that everything in the order of creation reflects that unity like this shell. Everything reflects that perfect order, except for one thing. I wonder if you can think of what that one thing that's out of order is. It's the human mind. And that is what sets the stage for human development. Because we're born ignorant, we have to be taught the spiritual path. We have to go and learn like children. We have to have experiences of getting up, trying it, falling down, and then trying again. And so that is the path for human beings. You know, the seagulls know where to find their food. You look at the eastern flyway of all the birds flying south this autumn as they're going down, they know where to go. They're in the order of creation. Human beings, that's another matter. Human beings create tremendous conflict. You know, I have to own that I have been part of those conflicts. So we take responsibility for ourselves. It's part of the nature of conscience. But it's because we're born out of order, and our life path, the spiritual path, is to find order. Now, this is the part that I didn't want the kids to hear. I'll just read it to you. I think I wrote it clearer than I could probably state it now. Think of the historical setting of the Christian church. The historical failings of the Christian church. Swedenborg teaches us that in the first 3 centuries of the Christian church, there was a common understanding of this unity of good and truth. But slowly, truth began to dominate the values of love, and eventually church leaders learned how to abuse the word, manipulate the innocent, and ignore the things that are good. Starting in the 15th century, large groups of people started to become outcast, such as the Jews in medieval Spain. This is all in the history books. As the goals of colonization in the name of the Lord advanced, so did the genocide of indigenous people by means of the militaries of the Christian church. As our nation became independent, African men and women became stolen. They started to become stolen from their homelands and enslaved in America, even as people were singing churches on Sunday morning. Only one generation later, after that, the gold rush in 1849 paired with an idea of manifest destiny, which spurred mass migration from the east coast of the United States across the Mississippi to actually inhabit indigenous lands and actually to create another genocide of our indigenous people. All of this was justified on some level by the leaders of the church. And that's a perversion of the use of the word. So without conscience, church leaders justified these heinous acts in the same way that Pilate washed his hands, even though he knew that he was talking to an innocent man who was going to be led to be crucified. Like Pilate, people of the church ultimately stopped caring about the abuses, which is symptomatic of so many these days who are in a despair of what to do, as our world is so wrapped up in awareness of social justice, the harms that have been done, and not knowing what to do to help. This particular harms that were done by the Christian church was all presaged by John in the book of Revelation in chapter 19, where he said he saw a vision. First of all, he was called to the marriage supper of the Lamb, and there he saw a vision. He saw a vision of a man on the white horse, and on his thigh it was written, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And the robe was dipped in blood. Think of what a shocking image that is. The blood represents, according to Swedenborg, the violence that was done to the truth of the word by means of people who abused the word. Our age right now is one where we're becoming more aware of this. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So briefly, let's walk through. Those are all the symbols in the parable. Let's walk now through the narrative of the parable. So there's going to be a marriage, but the bridegroom hasn't come yet. The church, with faith, come to really want to connect with the Lord at this marriage. And yet, where's the bridegroom? There's a delay, and then darkness falls. Suddenly at midnight, a cry is heard. The bridegroom is coming, prepare your lamps. Some people don't have the charity. They only see things through the eyes of truth. And then they go to those with love and with charity and say, can I borrow some of that from you? They say, actually, it's not ours to give to you. You have to go and find it yourself. So they come back, the ones who didn't have charity in their lamp, that didn't have love in their hearts, come back and knock on the door and say, we got it now, let us in. And something very uncharacteristic of the Lord happens. The bridegroom arrives at the door and says, I'm sorry, you cannot come in. It's a very hard statement, but what we are being told is that without love, we cannot have conscience. Without love, we cannot unite with God. If we only look at truth and think of everything in terms of a view of truth and what's right and wrong, if we looked at each other that way, all of us would be condemned. The only thing that really helps the world is the mercy of love, the empathy of love, and the compassion that conscience calls us to have. And so at the end of the parable, it says, watch, therefore, the day and the hour, for you don't know really when the Son of Man is coming. And in a way, we always think of this historically as, oh, well, we don't know when the second coming is going to happen. In the Swedenborgian Church, we know this has already happened. And so it means something a little bit more individual to us. Every day, we have an opportunity to act. I have an opportunity to act. I'm going to use I language for this. I have an opportunity to try to act in accordance with what is good and compassionate and also aligned with truth and with principles. Every day is a new day to try to do that. And it's not a perfect science. We are human beings. We are going to make mistakes. I will make mistakes. But still, that is what the Lord is telling us in this parable. To try every day, to try to do our best, to act from conscience and act for the betterment of all of the community and all of the world, to act from conscience and to act from love along the lines of principles of truth. Now, there was one last symbol that I didn't mention, but we read it. As for me, I will establish my covenant with you, and I set my rainbow in the cloud. It shall be a sign for the covenant between me and the earth. So there, way back in the 9th chapter of Genesis, nobody even knows when that book was written. Long, long, long millenniums ago. And yet it's a promise, because the rainbow represents conscience. So God is telling us, you are on a path. You are on a path and you will face darkness. And yet, don't lose hope. The morning star will come and guide you along the way. The conscience that I give to you will always be there. It's a fixed, permanent covenant that we all can think about and try to follow a day at a time. Amen.